Can you imagine what this concept will do to families that catch on to this?
Change their whole life.
Well, consider what has happened out there today in the everyday world.
You know, you mentioned in there about that people have abdicated their personal responsibility around their personal financial life.
Yeah.
And in doing that, because they've abdicated their own personal responsibility about the role of banking and the financing aspect of their own life, they must, by default, go and seek that somewhere else. They got to go to someone else's pot of gold.
Yeah. Example of that, cost of acquisition of finance. That it is unbelievable. And of course, the customers of these companies is the one who pays for all that sort of stuff. And what it took to get that government-backed guarantee and whatnot. Well, who pays for all of that? The people that bought Chrysler cars. Okay. Well, if you're in competition with Toyota, who had enough money on hand to buy Ford and Chrysler at that time and still have $5 billion left over, you don't stand a chance.
So that's another example of, in the car industry, he who has the gold makes all the rules.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah. It's just out there. The gold there, nothing happens.
Would you equate starting a policy and beginning the process of infinite banking as you're just building or creating your own pot of gold?
Sure.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
It ought to be totally yours. Right. It can be. It's easy to do, but it's just a different thought process. That's all.
What is the reason that you wrote the book to show or appeal that anybody can do this? You don't have to come from money or come from wealth to make this happen, implement this strategy.
Well, first we got to recognize there's a problem out there in the minds of people that's totally mixed up. And you end up with that situation where so many consumers in America today, it doesn't matter what it costs. How little can I pay and take that item out of this store? I don't know what the shoes cost, but how little can I pay monthly or whatever? Try this. Go to Sears. Go to the appliance department. Try to find the price of any item there. It is not listed. What is listed? How much is the monthly payment? Yeah. So that's the mindset that has evolved over a period of time. And it wasn't that way years ago when I was growing up. When you bought something, you saved up the money and then bought it. And it's over and done with. But it evolved to the point where we have this condition today that everything is talking about financing and such. And you have the commercials of the radio, maybe even the TV, but I know definitely about radio. Automobiles, that it doesn't matter what you owe on your trade-in, we'll trade with you. We'll pay that off. You get this new car or whatever. And that's why I was pursuing the fact that 95% of the cars traded in America are not paid for. Yeah, it's a foreign idea that it's all having to do with finance. Go to a closing out there, and everything at the closing is concerning the financing package that was involved. All the activity, all the questions, and all the boxes that got to be checked, and all the documents that have got to be provided, so forth, has to do with the mortgage. Whereas if you just paid for it, there's a deed and there's money, and that's the end of the deal.
It becomes very simple that way.
Yes, and been very profitable because you see, you make what was going to those other folks. That's all there is to it. And again, the idea of the aquarium, self-contained. All the activity it takes to exist enclosed in a small area. Well, within a family, that can be done with no trouble at all. And can you imagine what this concept will do to families that catch on to this?
Change their whole life.
Well, consider what has happened out there today in the everyday world. What about the divorce rate that there's out there today? Christians and pagans, there's no difference at all. They've both got the same cotton picking problem. God bless him. Lamar Phillips was a guy I worked with a long time with my Equitable New York days. He had 2 daughters. Between the two, there were 5 marriages.
Wow.
Well, let's get personal. My oldest brother had a boy and a girl. The girl went 3 marriages. And today she's married, but she's a Episcopalian priest. This has been caused by our educational system. Our educational system has taught us to be dependent upon governments. There's a tremendous element of dependence in the act of worship. Are you going to worship that on which you're dependent? Well, people won't recognize that. Christians say they worship God, but suggest you take away one of the government programs that they like very much and see what happens. They can't conceive of life without that government program. One very good friend that for life that he's been dead several years now, sang in the choir with me and so forth, and had 3 boys. I agree with what you're saying, but I can't conceive of life without Social Security. That's an idea that should never have come up in the first place. Mm-hmm. It's wrong. We'll fail. That's no question about it. It's inherently defective, the whole idea. DeSoto, in all his writings, he points that out vividly. That's why I love that guy so much.
And the government programs kind of ties into the golden rule a little bit because, again, it's
Sure.
who has the perception of the gold at the stage.
Yes.
Did you mean to, get
It's
people
inferred,
to think about that?
yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That they should make that correlation on their own, but sometimes you have to get specific with people here to get them to understand and recognize. Okay, let's put it this way. I remember years ago in a Sunday school group that I was in of folks my age and whatnot, I was talking with them on an outing that we had about we're all against sin, but let's talk about what is sin. And they'd always come up with some specific item of some kind. Well, that's not the definition at all. It's obvious that we didn't just happen here. We were created by a creator. And that creator created us for fellowship with him. That was the whole logic. And we're not here for a very short period of time. Good grief. My 87 years is nothing compared with history of this universe and so forth. This is training camp for the eternal, and that's all. All right, he had to give us free will, and that included the ability to reject him. Yeah, there's no way you can have fellowship with a puppet because you are the puppet. That's ridiculous. All right, so what's our tendency? It's to reject him. Well, rejecting him, it means separation from. Sin is any separation from God. Anything is separation from God. Well, how many ways can you do that? Good grief. Man's so egocentric. Yeah. His nature is to be away from. All right, now consider this, Richard. Jesus had that mission to redeem us from sin. He's on the cross. My God, why have you forsaken me? Mm-hmm. He was separated from God the first time and only time. That was sin. He became sin. Sin has a price, death. That separation is what killed him. It wasn't all those beatings and things like that people refer to that preceded putting him on the cross. But yet, watch what happens out there with people describing that time of year. All the references is about all that beatings and abuse and whatnot. That didn't kill him. If you had a coroner's report at that time, they died of a broken heart because he was separated. Now let's put it down to a simpler turn here. I remember a preacher one time saying, wife was riding down the road with him, and in those days we had bench seats on cars. We didn't have bucket seats like we do now. And she says, we used to ride close to each other and so forth. And she was over against the passenger's door, whatever. He says, I didn't move. Well, same sort of thing. God does not move. People do. Well, that's what creates all of our problems out there is that we can't identify sin. We don't know what it looks like. The separation there is encouraged by the devil, Satan. He makes all his stuff look like it's going to be attractive. It will work. We don't need God. But the fish hook gets you, and you turn around and bite you in the butt every time. but people still can't catch on.
The fish are the last to see the
They-
water.
Yes, because they don't recognize what is sin, what caused me to separate from. Yeah. And this takes a long time to get through to people, and that's why this is a training camp for the eternal, that's all. It takes some time to get all that nonsense out of your brain, and frankly, most folks never do.
My brain ties into government programs as I'm listening to you share these references to me. It kind of ties back to a conversation we had a minute ago with a story you share about driving down the interstate and following a truck that had a specific message on the back.
Yeah, I'm riding down the interstate there, and about 15 miles or so. I'm looking at the back end of this truck all that time, of course, and I see a sign up there that this truck paid $8,756 in taxes last year. And after a while, it dawned on me that that's a lie. That truck did not pay those taxes. The company that owned that truck did not pay the taxes. Who paid the taxes? Anybody who was a customer of that business. That was who paid the taxes, because customers pay for everything. But that is not generally accepted out there. People compartmentalize these things and they quit thinking at that particular point. It's kind of like the last sentence of the EVA story in Fortune magazine there. That one line tells all. It says, if you know what's really happening, you'll know what to do. But people don't take the time to figure out what is really happening. And so they take partial information and run with that. And that partial information there can get contaminated very quickly. So if you go back and examine the basics regularly and catch yourself, how did I phrase this particular thing and what was the real truth, so forth. It's just like earlier here talking about the sunrise and the sunset and so forth. Well, there is no such thing as sunrise and sunset. The earth revolved. That's what caused the change of night and day and so forth. And also I asked him that, look, earth revolves around the sun, right? Well, there's a satellite, our planet, it's called the moon. It goes around the earth. Well, which way does it go? East to west or west to east? Well, that's going to be a full moon, and it's still dark and out there. And after a while, you see the moon peeking up over the horizon. Now, as the night wears on, it looks like that thing's going from east to west. But that's not true. It's going the other way. It's going west to east. And to prove the point easily, all you got to do is just take that same full moon that rose there, so to speak, is the way that is phrased in everyday language. Go out there about 8:30 or something like that and look at the moon. All right, now tomorrow night, clear night, you go back out there at 8:30 and look at it, and it moved to the east. It did not go to the west. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the 28-day lunar cycle. Well, there's so much of that same sort of thing that goes on out there that the descriptions we have are totally erroneous. But people accept that erroneous stuff and don't question it, and so we end up with all kind of ridiculous stuff. It's like maybe we talked about this whole idea of Social Security, that the employer pays half and the employee pays half and so forth, and that is not true.
Consumer pays
The
for all of it.
employee pays for everything, always. But yet one of my very best clients, his wife was the bookkeeper for the business. She says, "Oh no, we pay half." How can you explain this to somebody like that? No, you're going to have to ask them to think, and that's painful.
Some people would rather die than think.
True. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I forgot who said that. Who came up with that? You remember?
No, I don't remember.
Yeah. But it's true. They'd rather die than think. It's too painful.